Hey, good morning. So we're up to Shin Pei Beis Seif Zayin. Says the Mechaba. Imsach Remeni Yehudi. So you got a chotzer, and you got at least two Yisraelim living there, and you've got this Eini Yehudi, and that is Isa. He's restricting. So you've got to deal with it somehow. So you've got to be Seicher Reshus from him. Now, Imsach Remeni Yehudi L'Zman Yodua. So you do it for a specific time, for an amount of time. L'chsheyich le'hazman, says the Mechaba, when that time elapses, you've got to renew the schirus, and you've got to also renew the eruv that the Yisraelim made, the ein eruv rishon chayzev v'neir. Because once the schirus has elapsed, then the eruv is automatically undone, and when you redo the schirus, it doesn't sort of reawaken. You've got to do the eruv afresh as well. Says the Mishnah Berurah, even if this akum did not back out, because you said, for example, let's do this for a year. I want to, you give him £1, $1, and you're being soicha his reshus for a year. So after the year, it automatically elapses. Even if he doesn't sort of back out, because automatically it lapses. And it's partial that even if he says to you, I'm happy to go further beyond that, it's not going to help until you actually are socher again. I think, Yossi, were you asking this yesterday? Or I can't remember who it was. What happens if you rent it from the akum and then he passes away? And he leaves someone to be Yereshim. It doesn't help what you did a schira with the Meirish, with the father. Because when he died, the schiras has gone. Because even in his lifetime he could have retracted. That's the lashon of the Taz. Says the Mishnah Berurah. This is the Taz l'shitosoi le'el shekosav b'sivov da'afilu b'toich zman yochel lachzor, that even toich zman he's able to back out. Aval lefi ma she'eskimu achreinim sham the b'toich zman eini yochel lachzor b'shum inyan, that we actually paskin not like the Taz, that during this time period that he originally agreed to, he's not allowed to back out. Imkein afilu meis, that even if he were to die, lo nisbatlas schirus, that it doesn't cancel, that it just carries on until whatever was agreed. And even if the Yeresh is protesting it now, it doesn't help, because the Meirish, his father, agreed it for a specific time. He was unable, according to those who oppose the Taz, to back out, and therefore it doesn't make a difference. The Yeresh is just standing in his shoes, but he can't back out. If, however, he didn't specify a time, and he just said, okay, I'll rent you my rishus, and then he dies, then mistabradan is battle memela haschirus uchadirataz. Then if he dies, then memela the schirus is bottled, and you've got to do it again. And even if the son, this Yeresh, says, I'll step into my father's shoes, mistabra delay mahani, mistama, that's not good enough. It's not good enough. It's not going to help. Until you actually renew the schirus from him. Okay, and you've got to renew the erev as well. To mikimishon is batal schirus, since the schirus has been bottled. Mimeilan is batal erev, then automatically the erev is also bottled. The ein erev moed the makamakum, because the erev wasn't effective when there is a non-Jewish person residing in this chotzer. And we don't say afterwards, we don't say that the original erev reawakens. Okay, so to summarize Zion, what have we said? That if you do this schirus from the Eini Yehudi, in this chotzer where you've got one Eini Yehudi and at least two Yisraelim, and you seicha from him for a zman yodua, when that zman lapses, when it passes, then you've got to be seicha from him a second time, and you've got to do the erev again as well. The ein erev rishon chayzev v'neir. Okay, and then we discussed that what happens if he were to die. The Taz says that if you rent it from the akum, and then the fellow dies and his son is Yeresh, then it doesn't help because this battle keach haschirus. But that only is according to his shitta. who says that that he can back out. But according to the Achronim who argue the Taz and say that he can't back out, so then once he agreed it, even if he were to die, and the son protests it, his protest is not going to help. Okay.
This would help by all steers.
Yeah. What do you mean?
That scenario if the father dies.
Yeah. This is, but in relation to the Erev, this is what he's addressing. Yeah. You're talking Choshen Mishpat and generally. Yeah. Okay. Ches. Im sachrei me'ene Yehudi lezman yodua. Now, what happens if he does this schiras rishus from an Ein Yehudi for a specific time, let's say a year, 2 years, whatever it is, or b'teich hazman hiskir ha'Ein Yehudi diros la'acher, he sublets. He rents out his property to somebody else. Die b'schiras harishin. It's okay. You can continue the arrangement with the original schiras. Says the Mishnah Berurah. The implication is, before we actually go to Mishnah Berurah, take a look at note 45, very interesting one. Well, what's the svara? If you rent it from an Ein Yehudi, and that Ein Yehudi sublets it, so you can rely on the original schiras that you did with the original Ein Yehudi. So he says in footnote 45, of Atam Hadova, Kosav B'Shalit Shuvas HaRashba, Sha'Yisraelim Kva Konu Zuchus B'Diras HaNochri. You've already been kaina this right in his dira, V'Hanochri En Yochel Lachzav B'Miaschiras, and you can't back out. V'Lokach Gam K'Shanochri Maske Em Abayis La'acher, says the Rashba that when he therefore sublets it, Adayin Nisheres HaSchiras HaRishon HaKayemes. That original thing stands, and that's just the svara of why this mechaba. Yeah. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah Chav Ches Lezman Yodua. You do it for a specific time. Miloshin Zeh Mashma De'im Sochem Imenu Stam. The implication is that if he did the schiras sort of open-ended without any specific time, then Viskir Lacha, and then the Ein Yehudi sublet it to somebody else, Sorich Liska Me'asoicha Sheni. Then it's different, and you actually have to do a new schiras from the second guy. Now, if you look at footnote 46, he says, if this is real sort of landlord and tenant rules, that if the soicha, if the original one can evict the second one whenever he wants to, then you can still go back to the first guy. So again, what have we said? That if you rent it from you've got a situation in the chotzer where there's, let's say, a couple of Yisraelim or more, and you've got an Ein Yehudi there, and you've got your Eruv, which is fine, but you've got an Ein Yehudi, an Akum, who's Oiseh, is restricting you. So you've got to be Soicher Rishus from him. Now, what if you're Soicher Rishus from him, and then he sublets it to somebody else? So the Mechaber says, if you did it for a specific time, and then during that time he sublets it, die b'schiras harishin. That was the svara, because that was the original arrangement stands. But says the Mishnah Berurah, the implication is that if he did it stam, and it wasn't for Zman Yodua, and then he sublets it, so then you need to go on to the second one to have an arrangement with him to do the schiras again with the second one, unless the first one still retains some sort of rights, i.e. rights of eviction on the second one. Okay. Chavtes uv'toich hazman hiskir, says the Mishnah Berurah, v'huadin im mochar lacher. So too, if he sells it. V'atam, and the reason is the schiras liyom enami mimku. Essentially, schiras is a form of sale. It's just for short, it's like renting, for a shorter period. V'eini yochel limkar azuchush enosen kvar la'acher. And he can't sell the zchus that he's got to somebody else. Okay, fine. Tes. Chamisha adar b'chotzeh. So you've got, let's say, 5 Jewish people living in a chotzeh, and you've got one Ein Yehudi. Now, how does it work? Does each of the 5 people have to do this schiras with the Ein Yehudi, or is one enough? Says the Mechaber, Chamisha adar b'chotzeh, echot soichem Ein Yehudi b'shvil kulam. One of the Jewish people can go on behalf of all of them and do the schiras rishus from him. Says the Mishnah Berurah Sivkat Lamed, Hainu she'ein tzorich kol echad ve'echad liska mimenu, ela kivin she'socha echad mehen mimela hutru kulon. Says footnote 49. Why? This very simple svara. Schiras zu she'soicha yochid kosav ha'shulchan aruch harav she'ein tzorich lefarish ba she'soicha avu kulam. You don't need to even tell him that you're doing it on behalf of the other Jewish residents. The svara is simple, that all 5 of them had to do an Erev together. So essentially they're one entity.
Who's paying for it?
Remember, let's say there are 5, in his example, there are 5 Jewish people, and you've got a non-Jewish person. So the five had made an Eruv together. Each one has got to contribute to the Eruv, etc. Yeah, because they've got to make their Eruv, and each one contributes a bit of the flour, a bit of the money, and then one of those five can go to the Ein Yehudi and can do a schiras because he's representing all of them. That's all. Okay. Yud. Very interesting. What if you are seicher from the Ein Yehudi bal karchai? Yeah, so you knock on his door and you say, look, we're Jewish, there's some things we can do, some things we can't do. One of the things we can't do is carry on Shabbos. But if I were to be seicher Yerushalayim, I rent your rights in this jointly owned chotzer, then that will enable us to carry. It won't impact you at all. Are you okay with that? He goes, no. Right? So you want to do it bal karchai. So you say, well, too bad, I'm renting it from you, and you put down some money on his table. Ein amayel, it doesn't work. Says the Mechaba, Im sachar memenu bal karchai ein amayel. Afal pisha yirogel lahaski, even though he was mikaydim, even though he did it previously, it doesn't work. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sivkot Lamed Aleph, Pirush, ein yicholin litin schirusay. He can't give the schiras in his rishus la nichel lefonav ala shulchan. He can't just put some money down on the table and walk out. Va'afilu ha'akum shayirogel at kol lahaski lo rishus. Even though he was agreeable to do this previously, v'loy malay har lechos schiruscha ba'ad rishuscha. I'm giving you this money for you to be soicha your rishus, shehilon rishus letalta b'chatzrecha l'shona k'moshe lefnim, that we're going to do it for the next year like we've done it previously, doesn't work. V'afal gav de legabe eruv ikamandom b'soif simen shin zayin, shin samach zayin. That be'eruv imrogel la'arvein reisa achshav boim v'noit limene bal karchai. With an eruv it works. Yeah, when if let's say there are a few people in the chotzer and I've got a few yidden and each one's got to contribute a little bit to to this joint eruv, and then suddenly one guy says, no, I'm not partaking. So then you can do it bal karcha, because if you did it previously, you can say to him, well, listen, you were previously happy with it, you can make him do it bal karcha. But yet with this akum not, so what's the difference? So hacha shani, the ein medam in akum Yisrael in kfir b'dvar mitzvah. You can't compare the two. When it comes to a Jew, the dvar mitzvah you can be kofer, but not for an ein Yehudi. Now this is fascinating, because I came across this recently in Parshas Vayikra, not for now, but just very briefly. There's a concept in Karbonos and in Gerushin of Koifin Oisoi Achi Ani. It applies both in Gerushin and for Karbonos. So that means a guy brings, he does an Aver, he's got to bring a carbon. So then he says, no, I'm not bringing the carbon. Basin can be Koif for him. It says Lirtsoinoi, he's got to do it willingly. The answer is that the Pinta Liyid inside him really deep down wants to do it, and you're being Koif for him until he realizes it. Right? And so too with the Gerushin as well. Ashetesi nafshe. Koifin ois Ashim Eroitzani. Ashim Eroitzani.
So which is the taste?
That's for, that's something else. That's an einish for something else. Yeah, but Koifin ois Ashim Eroitzani. I Eroitzani, but you can see everyone, the onlooker says, what are you talking about? He doesn't want to do it. Teretz is, deep down, the Rambam explains in Hilchos Gerushin that deep down he wants to do it. But that doesn't work with an Ein Yehudi. And it brings in Hilchos Karbonos. The Tzvi Pesach Frank brings this. He says that if a guy, he can bring a carbon, but he didn't bring the Nesachim. So then you have to, the halach is that his mission is the Gemara in Menachos that he brings from the Beis HaMikdash funds. But you don't force him. Why can't you force him? So say Koifin Hashem Erotzani, you do that with Karbonos. Says Rabbi Pesach Frank, based on this Rambam, the whole concept of Koifin Osei is because deep down he wants to do it, because he's meshubah to do mitzvahs, but that doesn't apply to an Ein Yehudi. And therefore you see the same chiluk over here. So with the schiras rishus with an Ein Yehudi, if you do it against Bal Karcha, Ein Amoyel, it doesn't work. But if you've got a Yisrael who was previously agreeable to it, now changes his mind, Bal Karcha does work. Okay, let's just do one more halacha, Yud Aleph. What about going to his wife, the Ein Yehudi, and being seicher rishus from her, or somebody else in the family? Says the Mechaba Yud Aleph, you are allowed to be seicher rishus from the man, the Ein Yehudi's wife, or from his worker, his schiroi lakitoi, seichrim, afal pishu moicha, even if the balabayas, the Ein Yehudi, is protesting, still, you can go to his wife or one of his workers and do it with them, or schira shel schiroi, because he's sort of in the shoes of the Baal Habayis himself. Says the Mishnah Berurah Lamed Beis, Avol me ishtoi, v'uadin me'echol mibnei beisai, or another family member. What's the difference? Pirish sachi la'avodas kol shana. Sachi means that you hire him to work for the year, and likita limos hakotzeh, for the season, just for the harvest or whatever it is. Af al pishu moicha, even though the Baal Habayis is moicha. Now, why? So, Kivan, Mishnah Berurah in Lamed Dalet, Kivan de me'ika din ein diroso eseres. essentially, the dira doesn't asa, as we've said before. It's all a takonas chazal that you shouldn't learn from his ways, and therefore so Chazal will make it further and to say that okay, the worker of this fellow is like the balabayas and he can act on his behalf. Because of hagroba biuray, this only goes according to the first simon, the first day in shin samach zayin. Avladas yishem sham gam beishta in yochel lisker mimeno im habal moichi gam babafeir shaloi taske. According to that opinion, that if the man protests, then you cannot go to his wife. Okay, shall schir v'lekitay hainu k'shyesh lehasochir rishus lokachas sochir sheyilo rishus lishtamish b'alabayis, that you've got permission to do so. To oz havilek schirai gam kein kilo hasochir b'alabayis, i.e., one of the workers can hire another worker, so you can go to that new worker because he's got rishus to do so. So essentially, what have we said? That if we've said today that lots of different things regarding Schiras Rishus. Again, the setup is you've got a Chotzer with one Ein Yehudi there and two or more Yisraelim. You've got to make an Erev with those Yisraelim together, and then you've got to be Soicher Rishus from the Ein Yehudi, and you don't have one guy can go and represent all of them. We also said that we talk about if it's for a specific time, what happens if that time lapses. You've got to renew it, and you've got to redo the Erev as well. And then we said, can you do it Bal Korchai? So we said that Bal Korchai does not work. Ein Moel, even though you had previously had an arrangement and he was agreeable in the past, you cannot work Bal Korchai. You can't force him to. You can't just leave the money there and walk out. However, you can go, according to the Mechaber, you can go to his wife or one of his workers, and if they are agreeable to rent out his rights, then that would work. According to the Gan, if the guy protests, then Ishtay will not help you. According to there's two opinions that in Shin Samach Zayin. Okay, Beseda, we'll leave it there.